Welcome back to another episode of Letarte on Location. Today, a comfortable location at a racetrack, actually at New Hampshire Motor Speedway for the Cup weekend. And my guest, two guests, well, one guest and one I'm going to call him a co-host. My guest, Steve Myers, and I'm impressed. I'm to make sure I get this whole title in. Executive Vice President and Executive Producer of iRacing. Did I get it all?
You did. You got it right.
I mean, do you have to have like an extra long business card?
I do. It is a little bit longer.
All right. And my co-host, I'm going to call him co-host, my buddy, my teammate on NBC, Dale Earnhardt Jr. Dale, thanks for coming on, man.
I'm excited about this.
He's been giddy all day. So listen, let's just start with the beginning. I get so many questions. iRacing, just what is it, right? For the listener that doesn't know, help explain what iRacing is.
I think I started a little bit further back. So iRacing is sim racing, but sim racing really started in the late 80s. Our co-founder, Dave Kemmer, started a company called Papyrus Racing Games. And
well, I shouldn't say everybody. The NASCAR guys know.
Yeah.
Papyrus is like, that's where it all started.
Yeah. So we started in the late 80s, or he started in the late 80s, and he made a game called Indianapolis 500, the simulation. And it was like the first time that somebody made a PC simulation that the end user could use that kind of really tried to mimic what happens in the Indy 500. And it was really successful. And then from there, in '93, he did NASCAR Racing, which I think even still to this day is the most successful NASCAR title that was ever sold, because there was no competition at that time.
Right.
You know, racing games didn't even really exist at that point. There was, some small ones here and there, but it was really super successful. And then we did an IndyCar title, and we did that for all the way through 2004. And through the years, David sold the company to Sierra, which was then bought by Vivendi Universal. And in 2004, we had, we were doing NASCAR titles exclusively at that time. In 2004, we lost the NASCAR license to EA. They got an exclusive license to do it. And so at that time, we kind of saw this coming. And we've been kind of talking internally about, what can we do, next? And we had the good fortune of having John Henry, who's the principal owner of the Red Sox.
So let's just make sure everybody hears that, because I hear this a lot. So the principal owner of the Red Sox owns part of Roush Fenway. That John Henry is the iRacing John Henry.
Correct. And what's really interesting about that, so John and Dave partnered together, and they started iRacing because John fell in love with racing because of Papyrus Racing Games. Like, he got into it in 2002 by being a fan of it, and he had a league and he ran races, and so he was so passionate about it. His real vision was, and this is unbelievable to me, 15 years later, that his vision was to create the virtual sport of sim racing. And so that was his passion in this whole project. Dave's was, again, from 20 years of making simulation, that was what he was passionate about, making an authentic racing simulation. But John's is like, he wanted to create a sport. And what's so crazy about this now, 15 years later, we're in this world where everyone knows that as eSports. And so we've started our company in 2004 as an eSport. And we were the first company really doing eSports. So it's pretty amazing that here we are now. We have, eSports is our claim to fame.
So, but for the listener, it does have eSports leagues where you can get all that, but anybody could do it, right?
I would say, when I try to tell people about iRacing, I say, look, if you want the most realistic opportunity at knowing what driving a car is like in real life, if you want the most realistic opportunity to do that, it's at iRacing. And that's any kind of car you can imagine. They have IMSA, IndyCar, F1, NASCAR, late models, legends cars, modifieds. They've got it all.
Dirt, asphalt, everything.
Yes. And, PC is on the cutting edge of technology with the CPU, the graphics card, all those things. The graphics and the hardware is the best that you can obtain over console or anything else. And so the software is equally as impressive.
Right.
And this is the best racing simulation and the best racing software that you can buy, that you can have in your hands and you're in the comfort of your own home. So when when people ask me about, what's iRacing, or why should I be in iRacing, or why should I use iRacing, or my kid wants to start racing,
Right,
or
right.
so I want to get my kid involved. That's the easiest avenue, really, sort of to get the basics. But if you just want to have fun, I mean, there's the everyman on there every single night practicing racing. They have races going off every hour in any car, any track combination you can imagine. And you can host your own session. You can put any car on any track and have your friends, JR Motorsports, our Xfinity team, they have a league night where they all get together, and the winner of each race gets to pick the track, and the guy who runs second picks the car. So they put any track with any car and have a race the next week. And so there's that's going on every single night all around the country with thousands and thousands of people.
All over the world.
All over the world, right.
Yeah, and just because I want to help spread this, because I love it. My son's been in it for years. And let me go ahead. For a kid that races in real life and sim races, the escape button is the cheapest thing known to man. And what I mean by that is when he makes mistakes and stuff is on the escape, you get a brand new car, you can go back out practicing, saves me thousands of dollars. So I appreciate it. But when you talk about equipment, it's a console, pedals, and a wheel.
Basically, you just have to have the tower, the PC tower.
Yeah.
You have to have a reasonable graphics card and a CPU. And the graphics are quite adjustable to be able to give you a great experience regardless of your system. You can have a single screen monitor, a 24 to 32 inch monitor is decent. You can go all the way up to triple screen or even virtual reality if you want to. I know a lot of guys that race on virtual reality headsets.
With like that Oculus looking thing I've seen.
And I've tried them, and it's amazing. It's like sitting in a car. You look around, and I've sat in a race car. It is exactly like sitting in a race car, and you almost forget where you're at in reality. And but to go back to it, you just a steering wheel and pedals. There's all kinds of models to buy, from affordable to really extreme. And I've raced at a basic desk all my life. I know a lot
everyone thinks you have this fancy setup. You're at the basic.
A lot of guys have these sim rigs that are basically like a race car chassis almost that they're sitting in, a pod, if you will, of that's fabricated and made that cost hundreds to thousands of dollars. I raced at a desk all my life. I just bought my first rig. I just mailed the check in to buy my first rig this past week. So you don't have to have that. You don't have to have triple screens or the best graphics card to go have fun and even be competitive.
And you hit the nail on the head. Like most people have a computer at home that can run iRacing.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember. Well, so how I got started is you built a computer for Jimmy or someone because he was going to go run. This is how accurate I knew it was. When Jimmy Johnson was going to go run a sports car at the Glen, he was like, "Listen, man, just go run laps on this thing." Yeah. And Jimmy said it helped, and then he, being Jimmy, mountain bikes and all that stuff, he's like, "I don't really race anymore." I was like, "Well, I'm going to go get that system," and I plugged it in, and I was hooked, and I've been running ever since. The unfortunate part for me is it just is one more tool to prove I can't drive. Yeah, that's the crushing part. I wish it was a little less accurate.
One of my favorite analogies to be able to help people understand how there's the recreational fun aspect to iRacing. For me, I jump in the dirt car and I'm like, "Oh, this is cool. This must be what it's like," and have fun and get my butt kicked by those guys who drive them all the time. But when I used it as a legitimate tool when I raced, and we were going to test at Road Atlanta.
Oh yeah.
And I was actually going to help Jimmy test. He had a 2-day test and could only be there the first day, and so I was going to run the second day, and I'd never been around Road Atlanta in a race car, and I spent the day before for about 4 hours running on iRacing. And when I got there and went out on the track, I ran times identical to what Jimmy had ran the day before. And the guys, I got out of the car and the engineer came up to me and said, when's the last time you ran here? And I was like, "I never ran here." And he's like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've never ran here." And he goes, "How'd you do those laps?" And I was like, "I've been on iRacing for a whole day preparing for this." And for a real race car driver, being able to get in the simulation and fire up your computer and go drive at any track, it is identical to the real thing. Paul Menard just recently this year used it for Sonoma to prepare, and because they're going to the carousel for the first time. Never ran it.
New track.
Go to Sonoma. They've got a new carousel section that they've reincorporated into the racetrack, and a lot of these drivers, Paul included, he has a new sim that he bought, a new simulation rig, and he ran on iRacing to get used to it. And they said, how good was it? And he goes, "It's identical. Shift points, braking points, the visual, everything. When I went on the racetrack, I felt like I'd been there before." and I wasn't lost. I didn't have to figure it out. You know, I kind of had all the basics understood, and I was able to get right up to speed because there's so little practice on Friday or Saturday for those race weekends, and he had cut that learning curve in half. And so for any driver, whether you're running even ovals, these guys in the K&N series that are going into the Xfinity cars or going in the trucks or going to these racetracks for the first time, to be able to get behind the wheel of those trucks, Xfinity cars, and understand the power and the grip and all that, and go to these racetracks for the first time, it's immeasurable how valuable that tool is. We know that Harrison Burton has a rig. He bought that rig not for fun. He bought the rig because it's going to make him a better race car driver, and he wants to use iRacing as a tool to get better.
And I think it was interesting that, I mean, with the change in the real world where testing and you know, you can't go rent a racetrack anymore and go test anymore.
I might get in trouble for saying this, but
those are usually the statements right before the best thing. So I'm all ears.
I've been in a manufacturer sim.
Yeah, right.
And I would prefer iRacing over the manufacturer sim.
You're not the only one I've heard that from.
Right. I'm a fanboy. I admit, I'm going to be in iRacing's corner on everything. But really, if I was to be presented with the opportunity to use one over the other, I would always choose iRacing because of how realistic it is. And for a guy who's been in the manufacturer sim and seen the software and understands how it works and how it performs, iRacing to me is hands down the most realistic thing that you can get your hands on.
Well, and we also have the advantage to that point too, is like we probably have 4 times the budget that these manufacturers have to work on these sims, because that's all we do.
That was one of the things that I told Steve that was going to blow your mind. So because I used to always come to you and go, man, y'all need to make this track. Y'all need to do this car. Y'all need to do that. Y'all need to do that. And you finally told me how much it costs. Not only the legwork that goes into designing these racetracks, which I think is cool if you got a chance to tell us all about that. But like, if you wanted to make a racetrack from scratch, we're going to make New Hampshire. We're sitting right here from scratch. How much is that going to cost the company?
I mean, so this track it's probably a medium-sized track in terms of you know what size of a track, and this will still be $100,000 to $150,000 for us to build this track.
And to design a car from scratch, we're going to build the Cup car, the Chevrolet Camaro.
$80,000 to $100,000 to do that.
I tell you, a $12 download seems like a pretty good deal.
Can you help us understand where that expense comes from?
So for the tracks, it's definitely in the artwork. So like we are very, very precise in like what we like to do on these tracks. I'll tell you a funny story. We did the Nürburgring, which is like the biggest track in the world.
14-some miles.
That wasn't 100,000.
How many miles is
that one? That one was probably a $500,000 track. You know,
was that right? 14 miles? 14.8 or something?
16, 14 or 7, I don't know. But there's so many.
You don't want to be wrong.
The sim world
out there.
I can't get around it.
The sim world out there will let you know.
I'll admit, I can't make a long road course like that. Like, I need my attention span. I need less corners.
Well, so our guys are they do things so perfectly. We went to the Nürburgring for an event, and we'd had the sim set up, and the track was still in development, and Greg Hiller, VP of Art and Production, was there and kind of demonstrating the track and flying around the track and showing these guys the track. And so there's this one, the last section of the track, there's a gas station that's on the other side of this fence where and every spy shot you've ever seen of a car at the Nürburgring is taken at this gas station because everyone has to go there to get gas.
Yeah, right.
And so they go fly over to that gas station. We fly over to the gas station and they start laughing, and we're like, what are they laughing about? And they go, zoom in on that gas pump, and we zoom in on the gas pump, and there's an out of order sign.
Yeah.
And they're like, we cannot believe that you have the out of order sign on a gas pump across the street. And they said, do you know why that has an out of order sign on it? We're like, no, we have no idea. We took the picture, we built it. And they go, because if people just stop there to fill up with gas, nobody else can get into the gas station to use the pumps. So they were blown away by that. But we do that for everything. Like Bathurst down in Australia we built. Like we have the prune farms. We have everyone, there's houses that are around that track. So there's driveways and they have unique mailboxes and tree stands, and we build all of that stuff. And so I think that's the reason why they're very expensive for us to build, because we put so much detail.
But that's what makes it different. Like when I go in and log in, now obviously I haven't driven like Dale Jr., but I have grown up at these racetracks. My motorhome used to sit in New Hampshire, right? I've driven through the tunnel hundreds, if not thousands of times, and when you roll off into turn 3, you're like, yeah, that's what it looks like. That's the stands, and that's the texture of the asphalt, the bumps. Yeah. So talk about that. So the artwork is one thing, But then what makes sim racing so just accurate, right? We have tire data, car data, all that. Who do you partner with? Where do you get all of those things to have all these cars and all this information?
One of the groundbreaking things that we did, and we were really kind of the first game developer to use laser scanners. And so at the time, like in 2004, we went and down to Boston, and we met with this company that showed us how there was the Russell Crowe movie Master and Commander, and they took a laser scanner and they scanned like this shell of basically a boat that was destroyed from that time. But they used that as the model to create the boats in the movie. And so we were like, well, let's use this for racetracks. And so we went and we laser scanned Lime Rock Park.
Normal people don't think that way. Let's leave, you know what we should do? Let's go scan some racetracks. So, which I'm glad you're abnormal, but normal people don't think that way.
Well, so we took the scanner to a racetrack and we collected all this data, and then we took it home and we created tools that allowed us to recreate the track perfectly. So every curb, every bump in the asphalt, every crack and painted line in the asphalt is all captured in the scan data. And so our artists and our production guys take that back and they like exactly replicate the tracks so that they're perfect. I love to tell the story. The late Justin Wilson, he was a huge advocate of ours, and was I love bringing the story up because it reminds everyone how great this guy was. But he helped us with the IndyCar, and we did the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and we were at an event, and he came and he drove it for the first time, and he's driving down pit road, and he goes out at the pit exit, and he pulls over and he stops, and I'm like, oh no, what did we screw up here? And he goes, I cannot believe that you guys have the bump that's at the exit of pit road. Like, no, you can't see it. Nobody else would know it except for the drivers, that there's this bump there that in the Indy cars, when you're coming out full throttle out of the pits, you know, you don't want to make a mistake on this bump because you're ending up out in turn one and there's cars coming 240 miles an hour.
Yeah, right.
The corner. And he was blown away by the fact that there was that bump there that nobody else would know was there. And that was the moment where I was like, we got something here. You know, like this scanning thing is going to really set us apart from everyone else. Now, if you're not laser scanning tracks, you're not making a simulation at this point.
Right, it's a video game. I mean, that's the difference. The difference between a video game and a simulation is that. It's the data, the cars, the downforce, the tire data, so many different things. How many tracks are in iRacing? Like, do you dare? Come on, man.
How many tracks? How many cars you got?
I've lost track. We're well over 70. I think we're over 30-something cars now, almost 40 cars. I've signed them all, and I don't remember them all, so I can't remember all the tracks we have. But we add about 6 to 12 tracks a year. Like a year we do the Nürburgring, that was like a really big project. That's like 4 tracks in one that we did on that one. But so we only make like 6 to 12 tracks a year and like 8 to 10 cars a year. So we take our time, we get them right. We build relationships with manufacturers and race teams, and have friends that help us out with their cars.
I've heard all the rumors. I've heard the rumors of the cars like going out in the dark of night to be scanned.
Well, that's a great story.
So it can be accurate. I've heard all these rumors.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of, of course, when I was really.
He's not sure how he's going to.
No. I mean, I got nothing to hide. But
Do you remember the COT story?
I mean, you can go ahead and tell it. I don't remember it like you do.
So.
Tony Jr. told me it.
Yeah,
I think why it was going down.
Well, so what was funny, so when we first started the company, remember back in the early 2000s, I'm not blaming EA, but EA broke the model in that they expect to write a big check to somebody and they get everything they want. And, but that's not how this business should work. And so when we started this business, we've approached it as we want to create partnerships. We want to find companies that view this as marketing as it is, that we're providing them something, but we also want their help to build this content and to advertise their product. And so we had trouble in those early years to get, especially race teams, to let us have access to the cars, to laser scan them and photograph them.
Can't imagine why.
Yeah. And so
I think I was one of the guys who were like, hell no. They're like, they want to do what? It's a pound sand. Tell them to go down the street. You're not checking on my stuff.
Well, we were having trouble when they switched to the CO2 because it was a late change and it was a lot of work for us to get the data. We couldn't find anyone that would help us, and I asked them, hey, we need to get access to a car. And so I only heard part of this after the fact, so I didn't really know everything that would happen.
You wanted plausible deniability, like I don't want to know all the details, just make it happen.
So a hauler shows up at JRM,
yeah,
on the back, and the garage door opens, and out rolls his I think it was the amp car at the time, rolls out, and like it was like somebody had rolled a nuclear weapon into JRM shop. I guess there was people scattering like all over the place. They're like, what?
I want to be part of this.
What is that
Someone's
doing in
getting
here?
fired. I know nothing.
And so we laser scale the car, we photograph it, and then we put it on a chassis dyno. And I guess back in those days, that was like probably still a big no-no. And so I guess the engine tuner set it up on the car, got everything running, and he's like, I'm out of here. I have nothing to do with this. And so we sound recorded it, we scanned it, and we photographed it. Well, come to find out, I guess Tony Jr. just quietly put his California backup car on the hauler and to bring it over. And so I guess they were looking to load this thing up to take it to California, and they can't find the car.
So I had this, because something else came up at a meeting I was in, and I had a question. He was like, hey, if you hear anything about this, you don't know anything about this. Hey, I don't know anything about anything. So
I think they actually damaged the side skirts.
Probably.
When they put it on the chassis dyno, and I guess your body shop guys were out there fixing it before they put it back in the trailer.
Yeah. So they had to have it on the chassis dyno to run it to record the sound, to get the authentic sound of the motor. And I was, I knew that iRacing was scanning the car to put it in their system so that all these sim racers would have it, right?
Yeah, right.
They were going to be rejoicing.
Yeah, right.
And so I knew there was no competitive information going anywhere to the wrong people. And so I did everything I could at every opportunity I could. I mean, I'm talking engine numbers, torque, horsepower.
Right.
There was a lot of, NASCAR had all kinds of changes from year to year, and I would try my best to supply them with the information to help them understand, okay, this has changed the motors, and peak power is now here and not, not where it was, and trying to get aero numbers so they could help them, tire numbers to get, help with the tire model and all that. I mean, I can't even remember all the emails and
one of the greatest things he did
sent.
Is that he actually brokered the first meeting between iRacing and NASCAR. Do you remember this? So we just kind of started the company, and he was kind of up to speed with what we were doing, and he was actually on our competition committee for a while and helped us actually come up with a lot of the rules and things that we did when we started the business.
You didn't know that.
He told me one day, he goes, one of the best days of my life, and I'm like, 1-2 Daytona 500s, this is going to be pretty good. I got invited to be a beta tester for iRacing. It was
the best day ever.
It came in and it was like, duh, I can't wait. This is great.
Yeah.
Well, he was so passionate about what we were doing, and he loves NASCAR too, and I think he understood that this needs to work. This needs to be happening. So he got NASCAR to come to his shop. We all flew down on John's plane to come, and the first meeting with NASCAR was in his boardroom at Junior Motorsports. And the funniest thing about that day, you being a Red Sox fan, is what happened during that day was Manny Ramirez got traded on that day. So we're on the plane, John's like, this is all happening. Like I'm sitting there like, I can't believe this is happening, right? And so he kept getting up.
Little something going on.
And we were in this big meeting.
John kept getting up.
Yeah, he kept getting up, going out of the room, taking phone calls. It was funny.
Training one of the most famous, most popular Red Sox. Nobody.
So I will never forget that day. It was July 31st. Was it 2008 or?
Good Lord.
Yeah. That makes me laugh. Yeah. Like that, all this stuff goes on. It's crazy. You talk about changes. So, how quick, like our jobs are now consumed by discussing changes, right? The garage area, downforce, power, NASCAR is doing all that stuff. How proactive do you try to be? So when you hear the new rules for 2019, how soon does iRacing say we have to have this in our system?
Immediately. We immediately start working on it. So this year was a great example. And as I was alluding to before, like things are different now than when we first started. Like I think now there's, we've kind of woven ourselves into the fabric of motorsport to the point where I think now NASCAR views this as an asset and something that can help them, get closer to their fans. And so, this last year with the new rules package, we had all that stuff, as much data as we could get. We were getting from teams, we were getting it from NASCAR, because from our perspective, and what's really great with this year, and you guys both know, is the Peak Series. we're running the track on the Tuesday before the actual race on Sunday. So we're in a lot of ways, we're previewing what the action is going to be on Sunday. And so we really try to be proactive with.
So the Peak Series you mentioned, we're going to get into the leagues and the series and all the things going on, but the Peak Series is the top. It's the top stock car series, the top 40 sim racers in the world. Dale, Junior Motorsports has a team in it. I have a couple cars in it. I mean,
Dale won the first race. He won the first ever
10 years ago, right?
eSport NASCAR race.
Got lucky on fuel mileage.
So how good is his iRating? So explain it. So everybody in there has a rating.
Yep.
So how good is his rating really?
I know you retired it.
I retired it just recently, so I'm starting a second account to start from scratch.
You didn't want to hurt the rating?
Yeah, he wanted to keep
I'm
it
so
at that.
bad now that if I went in and tried to compete with that account, I would tank it. And it's sort of like this achievement.
Yeah, it's up on the shelf.
It's up on the shelf.
It's in the top 20
still
or
in the
something,
top
right?
50 easy.
In the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I couldn't hold a candle to the guys in the Peak Series, much less probably half of the active users. I couldn't hold a candle to them today. But
So basically what it is.
So the Peak Series is Tuesday nights, kind of every other week. It streams. People can watch it.
Yeah.
There's commentators.
Yeah, it's a broadcast.
My wife is like, "What are you watching?" And my son was like, "What? What is it?" And as soon as you log in, as soon as you get past, I think people have this mental block. They're like, "Well, but it's not like this is racing. This is New Hampshire. I watch cars and this that." You get past all that. You are watching a race.
Yeah.
You're watching talented. They side drag. It looks, I mean, as good as what you see on Sunday. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's tens and tens of thousands of users, and these are the best 40 oval racers on asphalt in the service. I mean, these guys are elite.
Well, my driver, Chris Shearburn, he said, Shearburn is a driver? He was around like in the Papyrus days.
Yeah.
He's been driving these things.
Right. There's a couple guys that have real reputations that are 10, 15, 20 years old in the sim racing community.
Right.
Shearburn's one of them. Brad Davies that drives for us has been around forever. And then there's the younger guys that are dominating the series over the last couple of years. But they're elite. They're the best of the best. And it's hard, I think, for the layman to understand, well, what sets them apart? What makes a guy better than another guy? But it's just like I would, when I raced, it's practice, it's repetition, it's doing it, putting the time in, adjusting your car to your setup and your feel and what you like. But these guys put in the hours that it takes, the laps that it takes to be able to get out there and be perfect every lap. That was what I would be so amazed by, is that they could run the best lap over and over and over. And, and even, I got pretty good at it at one point, but I couldn't do the same thing every single lap, and I couldn't in the real world either.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, that's like, I joked, but that's the problem I have with it, is it's too accurate.
Yeah.
Right. And my point is that I have been fortunate to work with the best drivers in the world, so I can see what Dale has done and Jeff Gordon has done. And I get in there, and every corner I butcher. And I'm like, that is awful. And then the worst part is I could change the camera angle and see how bad I butchered it. I'm like, you're not even close to what you're trying to do here. It's so frustrating. So I stick with fixed setups.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's also, if you look at the Peak Series, it's extremely intimidating.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, but there's a lot for a guy like me who's basically starting from scratch, starting over with no ability, no understanding of how the cars drive and all that, and the grip, and really starting from scratch. There's places where you can go and be competitive. They have fixed series where basically there's no setup adjustments that's done for you. You hop in the car and you race, and everybody's got the same basic setup that you have, and it's just driver versus driver. And there's a ladder, a tier, that you work.
Because the bottom 20 are out.
Yeah.
Which I love. Like,
right.
Well,
it's so good.
Bringing up a good point. Like, so a lot of these racing games, they did it wrong. Even at Papyrus, we did it wrong. Like, the average person can't jump into a Monster Energy stock car and get it around the track. Like, so when we started the company, we said, well, let's teach people how to race, and that's kind of
classes of licenses.
Yeah, I mean, that's the basic core of it. Back to your original question, which is, we keep track of everything you do in the sim, like every time you spin, every time you hit the wall, every time you hit somebody else, and that's called your safety rating. So basically, we don't really care. We don't really care how fast you are. We care how safe you are. Like racing and in racing video games in general, what's very different about this than any other type of video game is if you and I go play Call of Duty, if I stink at it, it just affects me.
Right.
If you go out onto a racetrack and somebody is terrible at it, it ruins the experience for everyone.
Right.
And so what we try to do is start people, you start in actually Dale's street stock, which we scanned, we built. You start in that on the ovals, and then on the roads you start in an MX-5 Miata Cup
That
car.
Miata, me and that Miata, man, we got some hours.
So you learn,
that. Yeah.
you learn how to drive, you learn how to race around other people at that level, and as you prove that you're a safe driver, you graduate up to being able to run late models, modifieds, and Formula One cars, and Monster Energy Cup cars. But we like to pace you out and kind of teach you and allow you the chance to grow into be able to do that.
And there's that community of it, so I wish I had more time to play, but when I'm in there, you do a couple nights in a row, you start to see a lot of the same people. They know who you're racing with, who you're not racing with. So I'm working hard on my dirt license. I'm awful at
Me
dirt,
too.
But I mean,
I am too. That's been sort of my challenge over the last year, is to sort of get my dirt license up to something respectable, and it's been fun. Like I said, I'm retiring my old oval guy. I'm gonna start a new account. I'm starting from scratch, and I love that the milestones, the having a goal, I got to run this many races, do it safely and smart, finish well, and then I get to graduate into another car,
right.
and run newer tracks, and all these things start opening up and unlocking as you move forward.
So you mentioned John Henry had the vision of esports back before there was perhaps esports. Who at the company has the vision so I'm the consumer? And forever it was asphalt. You listed all the asphalt cars, but then all of a sudden I see this dirt world, right? So I'm fortunate. So let's talk about beta testing beginning of this. So I was fortunate because it started to come out. Some people got to test it a little bit. Like, who at iRacing says, you know what, we need to tackle dirt? Like, that's a big project.
Yeah, so it's interesting. There's multiple ways to answer that question. What really started that was a conversation with him. I remember this.
I'm starting to realize that, John, you've cost John Henry a lot of money. You had a lot of good ideas.
Well, one of the things that one of the times he came to visit, you were sitting down with Dave, and I don't know if this is something that you really talked a lot about at that time, which was we were talking to you about the track surface, and you were talking about how people have this misconception that I go to the top of the track because there's grip or that rubber on the track was the reason why people were fast. And you came in and you said, I go to the top of the track because there's no heat in the track there, and there's no rubber on the track there, and that I can get around the track quicker and nobody goes up there. And so it's like my own clean track for me to run in. And so that really got the balls rolling for me, where we have to do this dynamic track project. And so that was about three years ago. We finally got to it. That was about 8 years ago he told us that. But we finally got to it about 3 years ago. And so what we do now is wherever the car is on the track, we're keeping track of how much heat is going into the track, how much rubber is going into the track, so that when you watch these guys on Tuesday nights in the peak race, you'll see them start the race at one place on the track and the track will rubber in. But then as the race progresses, you'll see them moving around trying to find those cool spots on the track.
And if people listening think that's a sim thing, every high-end team in that garage area has an infrared shot of this racetrack through the entire race. Like, this is not new technology. This is just something that you felt like, okay, this has to be, if we're going to go to a racetrack and the best in the world are going to move around, if it's going to be simulation racing, then you have to need to move around on those tracks.
Well, we even put marbles on the track. If you go off track and you get into the dirt and you pull that onto the track, it's affecting the grip on the track. And so that once we've done that, then our customers, I mean, as a business, we like to listen to our customers. As you know, it's a membership-based product, and so we feel like our customers should have a say in what we do, because we want to make them happy. We want them to keep, paying for the subscription and enjoying the product.
How many customers? How many members you have roughly?
We've got over 350,000 accounts now. What's interesting about our service is that it's membership based. So like you can come, and like Dale, he raced for 8 years and then he took a break and he comes back and all his stats and all of his content, everything is still there.
Right.
So right now we're about 89,000 active users, which we grow by 15, 20,000 customers a year, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. And dirt, I told you, I can't get my kid back to the asphalt. He goes in there in the dirt, and he just races it. And if you've never played, you need to go on and log on, because when I say dirt, the cushion moves, the bottom slicks off. It is, well, I think it does. I can't run long enough without wrecking to know that the bottom slicks off, but it looks like it's going to slick off when I watch my son run.
It definitely does. And what's really, so after we did the dynamic track project, we said, you know, the customers really want dirt, let's do dirt. And we actually we announced it on April Fool's Day, which was another fun thing about it. We did it.
Because people have been begging for it for 2 years, and they were like, wait a minute.
We don't buy this. We don't buy this.
So we did it on April Fool's Day, and they all lost their minds because, like, we made it funny. Like, we had a guy dressed up in a lab coat at a dirt track with a magnifying glass, and he's tasting the dirt. And so they can't tell if it's a joke or not. And the joke was that it wasn't a joke. And so, you know, but it turned out to be a huge, huge thing for us, because what we didn't really kind of factor in is that it was a really underserved market in the space. Like, there hasn't been a dirt racing oval game ever really made in the last 10. Remember Dirtbag or Rat Bag?
The ones that had been made, people just devoured.
Yeah.
You know, there was Dirt Track Racing 2, and there was some really well done games back in the day, but like you know, there was nothing current and nothing new, and nothing that was going to be able to provide like iRacing could, with multiple tracks and different types of cars. You know, iRacing comes out with dirt now. How many cars on dirt side? I don't even know how many you got.
I think we've got like 6 sprint cars. We've got the 3 different late models. We got modifieds. We have midgets. We've got everything that you pretty much want to race on dirt ovals. We have.
Well, your marketing worked out well, because I watched the Chili Bowl, and your cars battled with Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell. They battled 1-2, both iRacing cars. Yeah. So whoever thought that was a good group to sponsor had that figured out pretty well.
Give that one to Otto.
Like Keith Coons and a group like that, they have to help you develop. You mentioned about scanning cars, right? Well, he has almost every car you just mentioned.
Well, what was interesting is Christopher Bell was into the pavement side. He was into iRacing, and then when we said, hey, we're building dirt, he's like, whatever you need, I'm going to help you with, because he's really passionate about dirt. And I'm not joking. He probably put 40 to 80 hours of testing in with our vehicle dynamics guys, who all of our vehicle dynamics engineers. I have one guy's come from Penske, one guy came from RCR, you know, another guy came from Formula One and IndyCar. These guys are, you know, worked on race cars, understand race cars, and so they know how to talk to a driver to get feedback on what the car is doing. And so Christopher Bell was huge in helping us get the dirt to where it is.
I've always said this, and I want to see if you feel a responsibility for this or an opportunity for this. You know, the challenge of auto racing, not NASCAR, auto racing in general, IndyCar, drags, it doesn't matter, is that every kid that goes to school dribbles a basketball. Every kid that goes to school throws a baseball. Every kid, unfortunately, doesn't get the opportunity to go to the rental go-kart track. I mean, it doesn't have to be this level racing. And I see that sim racing is that door, right? It's that mechanism for anyone, anywhere that has internet access can go and learn about racing, can drive, can host with their buddies, can fall in love with what, listen, I've made a living, I love racing, you love it. I mean, your stuff, I read all yours. I mean, it started early in life for you, your love of cars, your love of racing. I think iRacing has that opportunity to bridge that gap.
Yeah, it's a good point. And well, I always like to say the story, like if you go and play LeBron James in NBA 2K19, you might be able to beat him. I can almost guarantee you couldn't then go onto the basketball court and even have a chance of making a layup. I think what's really unique about racing is that you're doing all the same muscle memory moves that you would do in a real race car. And sure, there's not the dangers, there's not the heat, there's not the expense, there's not, you know, failures and all the things that could, you know.
You just eliminate a lot of the stuff you want to eliminate.
Yeah,
that's not a bad thing. It's not dangerous. It's not that expensive.
Yeah, but
all right, you get my vote.
But at the end of the day, like, and I've always felt like this, even back in the Papyrus days, that I always felt like it was something that could help find talent, could cultivate talent, and that could be something that ultimately is a pathway into racing. And I think now here we are, you know, 20 years later, and it's absolutely true.
So I challenge all my guests, because normally we end up talking about all the good stuff. Everyone has their story. What's the one thing, if you could go back in iRacing and say, this was wrong, completely messed this up, the one thing you could go back and change, what would it be?
You know, I've heard your podcast, and I thought
knew
about
this was coming.
Yeah, and
Because everybody can't talk about the good stuff.
yeah, I would say, you know, that I wish we'd hired more engineers sooner, and I think actually Kelly had a really good point last year at Homestead at the press conference after Tyler won, where she made the point of, like, you know, we're a small company competing against these big teams, and that, you know, the crew chief comes to me and says, I want these 3-4 things, and she has to make that decision to go, okay, pick 2 of them.
Right.
You know, I think when we started as a business, we kind of took that same approach. You know, like we've been in this business for now over 30 years, if you count Dave, you know, Dave full time, and like.
Dave, just to make sure all the listeners follow along, so Dave came from Papyrus. He is, when you look at iRacing, it's John Henry and Dave who came from Papyrus, so his experience is lengthy.
But I mean, I think we've always had a cautious approach on how we expand and when we expand, because in this industry, I mean, in the time that I've been doing it, there's been 4 companies that have done NASCAR console games. It's a really, really tough business, and so like you have to make good decisions with your money, and I think maybe we were a little too conservative in staffing up in the engineering department in those early years, but I think we also had the approach of the thought of, like, we want to do this forever. We don't want to be a company that crashes and burns because we expanded too quickly.
Well, so I challenge, and I have this conversation a lot, console versus sim, and my personal opinion is that they are not the same, and they should be marketed. They both are needed, in my mind, but they're very different. Like, I don't think they compete against one another. I use my son as an example, right? He has his racing buddies. They want to iRace. They're racing. They like what you just said, all the muscles, everything of racing. Their skill sets show up. Then he has a group of buddies that are frustrated with sim racing because they don't have any sort of background and they don't want to put the time in. And I think their console game does exist for those guys to still understand green flag, checker flag, yellow flag, like racing. And I think they both can exist, but they're very different.
I'll say this, like there's a game called PUBG, first-person shooter game. It's very popular. It's on PC, it's on console, it's on the iPad, PUBG Mobile. Me, I prefer PUBG Mobile on my iPad. I got friends that beg me and tell me I'm crazy to play on the PC. But I like the ease of being able to pull out my iPad and play it anytime, anywhere I want. And I'm not getting that much further into it. That's as far as I want to go in that world. I feel like that's the same way with console versus PC. There's some people that love the ease of firing the console up and jumping on, and they don't need all the bells and whistles. Right. And maybe they're not looking for that ultra realistic experience, and that's fine. There's a demographic that serves that very well. But if you are out there trying to get the most realistic experience, that's where it's going to be. It's going to be on iRacing. And
yeah, I mean, I think.
Well, I appreciate your opposite approach. Yeah. So I like both, and my point is, when I'm all in, when I want simulation, I don't want half simulation, right? And I'm on there now, and I can feel a tire model change, an aero change. I like to play with the setups. I mean, the limitation in my iRacing experience is the guy holding the wheel. Yeah. Like, if I had a professional driver, I think I could do better.
You know, we have in a lot of ways tried to make it more accessible to people. We're working on adding AI into the sim so that, there's certain intimidation factor of going in and racing against other people from all over the world. It's funny, I never even played multiplayer race games until I got to Papyrus. The first time I ever did a multiplayer race was in a beta testing night. So I started at Papyrus as a tester. So my whole job was to go and work every day and drive the sim. I mean, I would do tire and fuel runs at every track, and that was my job. And so
where do you sign up for this job?
I took a $40,000 pay cut and changed my whole life to do it.
It doesn't sound as cool now. You lost me.
The first multiplayer race I ever played was when we did a testing night, and he was in the testing that night. And I was like, here I am, like my first time I've ever done multiplayer, and Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s in the sim, and I'm like, what am I doing here?
Well, I was probably asking myself the same thing. I hope I don't embarrass myself. These guys made the game. They got to be good.
But that's why we're adding AI, because we know that it will make it an easier transition for people that aren't kind of used to simulation and getting into it.
The intimidation factor from multiplayer is real. Like I've had that as well on console with Madden,
I get sweaty, but when you talk about, we roll around, I'm a big Legends car, fixed setup Legends car, right? You go to Thompson, you roll around there, pace car pulls up, hands get a little sweaty, like this first corner, I can't mess this up, I gotta get in there.
You know those are real people in the cars around you.
If I hit this guy, he's gonna be pissed, but I can't let him go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's serious.
And then your name is, they know it's you, like in iRacing, you know.
You know, the little chat bar down there, you know, like, it was like, oh, Steve, it's so cool you're here. Now I'm sweating more. I'm like, oh.
I'll give you a suggestion. Turn off the voice chat, because then it just makes your life much better.
I have to turn off the voice chat for sure. That I don't belong there at all. We've talked all about it. So we talked about the Peak Series. Let's talk about, okay, the user as far as logging it. I get all of that. But now let's talk specific eSports.
I don't get the biggest regret question.
What's that? Oh, yours is. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I get.
No, you go ahead. What's your biggest? So
my biggest regret in my iRacing life.
Come on.
And I was dying to bring this up because this has been following me around like a dark cloud ever since it happened. But so I'm real big time invested, right? I'm on the committee. We're talking. We had this call in every week, and they're going over the idea of how to do things and change things, and I'm like, yes, this is awesome, and I'm heavily invested. And I got so invested that one day I emailed Dave, and I think I copied you on it, and I ranted about how so there's these baseline setups. He's laughing because he knows what this is. There's these baseline setups that come with each track. Right. Sort of get you a decent place to start. And I had it in my mind. I was like, these baseline setups aren't good enough. The people that come in here brand new, don't know what they're doing, are jumping in these cars, and they can't be competitive because these setups are so far off. I was like, y'all got to make these setups better and faster and get them closer. Get these people where they're going to have some fun. They're going to get in here and go, this sucks. I'm dead. I get into practice and I'm half a second off.
Right.
But it was a very wild email that I sent to Dave.
The owner.
Yeah. And that was probably my biggest regret.
Please tell me he gave you like a really simple response, like, okay, we'll give it.
He probably still has the email.
He probably didn't read it, to be honest with you. Dave doesn't check his email.
Let's hope that it's long gone out of the system.
I'll go back and ask him and see if he still has that.
No. Oh yeah, dig that up. We're gonna have to post that. That is outstanding. Oh, at least there wasn't anything on the track.
But it is a fair point. Like, because we ship those setups, like, we try to find a setup that kind of is like in the middle, because we don't want it to be really loose and people are wrecking, and then we don't want it to be really tight because then they're plowing. And it's a tough topic because it is kind of subjective in that some people like to drive a certain way, and all of that translates into the sim. And so, but that's what's nice about having fixed setup series. And no matter what, everyone's got to run that same setup. So you can just jump in and everyone's got to deal with the same way.
See, I don't think I've had this conversation with you yet, or I know I haven't, but I am team smaller setup options. I'm ready for the league.
Park already told me about that.
So I'm a big fan because I don't want, my fear is, so I love racing, and I'm going to raise my hand and say I'm one of the guys that have ruined this, and that's the arms race of technology, right? Being smarter, more laps, better setups. So it's like, I love what iRacing is. I love that I can mess with the setup, and I'm like, take 20 of the knobs away.
Yeah.
You know, make it a little less time sensitive, because it has yet to get real carried away. But I'm like, man, one of these 20-year-old kids that has nothing else in his life, he's gonna just kill us all with time commitment. And I know these guys already do it. The time they put in is unbelievable.
Yeah, my response to Parker when he brought this up to me was, well, instead of looking at it, instead of viewing that as a negative, why don't we elevate these guys that are really good at doing setups? Like, why don't we create crew chiefs and engineers?
Yeah, well, hey, I did tell, so I'm going to say it on here, and it's going to, and I'm going to tell you which one of my drivers.
The only thing about that is, the terms to, like, what you call, a track bar.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, the terms are different depending on the geographical location.
Oh, yeah.
And you got racers all over the world, and
but listen, so
bar, I don't know what that is. We call it a track bar.
So I'm not going to tell you which one of my guys, but one of my guys in the Peak Series, we were watching a race, and I felt bad. It's kind of my biggest regret, where the race was over, and I didn't ask. I should have said, hey, who's your crew chief? Who's helping you call the race? Instead, I'm like, I don't know who's helping you call the race, but he sucks. And then one of my guys was like, well, he's my buddy. I'm like, oh. So then I was all in. So I'm like, well, he's just not good. I was like, so why don't we do the next one? You put him on the phone with me because like he was pitting. I'm like, and like I feel like a team on him. Like, why are you? I'm yelling at the screen. Why are you pitting?
Yeah.
What don't you understand about fuel mileage? I was so mad. So then I did, and then so I fired one of those off. I'm like, well, your crew chief sucks. Well, he's a good friend of mine. Yeah. And at that point, I couldn't back down. I'm like, well, he sucks. I'm sorry, he's your buddy, but he's not good. You got to teach him how to crew chief. So I was going to the Peak Series, and then I see you have the Porsche. Like, John Henry's vision was eSports.
Yeah.
You didn't create eSports. You created sim racing. But now, 15 years or whatever later, you now have all of these eSports. Yeah. Is it what you hoped? Is it what you expected? Like, so you have the NASCAR funnel, right, with the Peak Series. Just explain to everybody the different funnels you have of these leagues and series.
So, you know, what's really, again, so cool about this place we are right now is that, you know, everyone now knows what eSports is. Like, all of these sponsors, every sponsor in this garage right now knows what eSports is. And what's really, really cool is, you know, teams now are presenting these, you know, sheets now of what kind of things can we do to get you to be a sponsor. And one of the big things that everyone keeps stomping on is eSports, because that's what everyone's seeing. That's how you get in touch with the younger generations. And so what's really cool is now we have, like, World of Outlaws is totally into it. Like, we're on their streaming platforms. They are promoting. We have the late model and the sprint car late model series with them. They're super popular.
Late model race. What a battle!
Oh, crazy.
Those guys are so talented.
Slide job after slide job.
I cannot believe how talented those guys are. So we got World of Outlaws. We have Porsche, which is really cool with Porsche is that you know, they have their one make series all through the world where they race the cup cars, and what we've done is recreated that series in iRacing, where you're driving the Porsche Cup car, which is their most important race car to them, because there's a series in every continent of the world where they're racing these cars. And so now the champion of our Porsche eSports series is going to get recognized at the Night of Champions in Germany. They're going to get a huge check. I mean, it's really...
Okay, go back. Check. These guys are racing like this is professional. The guy that wins the Peak Series gets
40 grand plus whatever winnings that he brings home. So we're going to...
I told my guy his crew chief sucked. Real deal. Like, I wanted my guy to win.
Yeah.
I mean, through all... So we have the two World of Outlaws, the Peak Series. We have the NASCAR Series. We have Global Rallycross Series, where you're racing rallycross cars. You know, and technically, I guess, the Ignite Series, and then we have the USAC
Ignite Series, which I think is fascinating.
Now, don't bring it up, because I'm going to get a rant. I've got a rant too. So go ahead, tell the story. Why am I in trouble for the Ignite Series?
So Ignite Series is a NASCAR youth initiative to try to cultivate talent, to get them into their foot into the door of racing. And so it's 13 to 16-year-olds, and they can come online, and they're racing Legends cars. And then ultimately, I think they're going to end up in the championships. They'll run the modified, I believe. But they are competing for prize money, but also the end result is a test in a Legends car and a Pinty car. And, you know, so this is their way to try to cultivate new talent coming into, you know, getting interested in racing. To your point, you know, previously, that, you know, there isn't a you can't go to the sports store and buy a race car to go run around in your front yard. I mean, this is the way that they're viewing to try to get younger and to try to cultivate new talent. So that's what the Ignite.
When am I going to see the NCAA iRacing League? Come on, like, when is UNOH going to line up against UNC? You
wouldn't be surprised. There's actually now esports leagues inside of colleges. There isn't racing as of yet. I've had some discussions with some of these organizations that are doing it, but there absolutely is esports now in the collegiate level.
I'm telling you, that's where, because then you get alumni. It's just, it's totally different. So I got a few random questions I want to know. So the iRacing logo is awesome. Is it one perfect person? Like in the NBA, it's Jerry West, right? Like,
yes.
Like, is the iRacing logo a race car driver?
It is.
Is it public knowledge or
no? It's not public knowledge.
Okay, but that is a real. That is a celebration of a race.
Does anybody know who it is?
Well, so our customers. What's really cool about our customers is that our product, I view it less as like a game and a piece of software. It's like community. I mean, so these guys even back in the Papyrus days, it was funny. I was talking to one of the Vivendi people who they hosted all the forums for every game that Vivendi had made, and they told me once that our customers generated more traffic to our forums in 1 month than every other game that they had under their umbrella combined for the year. Wow. So our customers are super passionate. They love talking racing. They love coming in our forums, and so I'm sure you could find 3 different threads in our forums of them talking about who is the driver that's in the picture. Yeah. And I remember seeing it, and I remember somebody did in fact figure out who it was. When we never confirmed it, but they had a picture that was almost, I think it was the picture that we used.
There it is. Reddit, whoever's out there, send it to me.
But they're crazy. They're crazy. Like I teased them once where we were doing Belle Isle, and so it's a track in Detroit on the island, and I had the guys that went and collected the data took a picture of this bench, and it was like all the wood had been like stolen from this bench, and it was just like a metal, like it was like a park bench that was just metal and sitting there with no wood on it anywhere, and I thought it was hysterical. So I had zoomed in on it, and I took that and I posted it, and I said, who can guess, what track we're scanning right now? Never thinking in a million years that they'd figure it out. Not even 12 hours later, they'd already figured out it was Belle Isle. Like they took pictures of the actual same table and bench that I had posted on social media.
So. Like you got the power of the internet will get you into. Do you go on the forums? Do you ever?
Oh
go on?
every day.
That's actually probably half the fun. I mean, you got the sim, but then you have the forum community, and they're talking about sim racing, iRacing, various cars and what tracks, and they're talking about what they're doing and what they're experiencing with the sim, but they're also talking real world racing and what's happening at the NASCAR race or at the Formula One race, or and it's pretty eventful in the forums.
One of the things they like doing the most, I think you know about this, there's a picture that Dale and I took with each other when we were one of the times you came to visit. And so I still don't know who it is. I have my hunt. I think I know who it is. It's one of 2 or 3 guys that do this. But every track that we release, they take this picture of Dale and I, and they hide us somewhere in the track.
Yeah. And I mean, each track has hundreds of thousands of spectators, right?
Yeah.
And me and him will be in some of the weirdest places. Like at the first track. So basically, we went outside and did this sort of pose, like we're cheering, like all the other fans will be in the sim when they create the track. And so I don't even know what shirts we're wearing.
So it's the
I was wearing
yeah. But anyhow, we
looked very young though. I can tell you. That. We got to update it.
They had released Phillip Island for the V8 Supercar series.
Yeah.
And they put us on a boat, which is out in the water. And it took them a while to find us. But
some of the tracks, they haven't found us yet.
Wow.
Yeah. But there's an awesome thread in the forums. That's just a perfect example of how passionate our customers are. It's like when a track gets released, one of the first things this group of people do is to fly around and try to be the first ones to find that picture.
Yeah. One of the greatest things about the forum and the community, for example, over the last several months, I've been getting into the virtual reality side of it with the Oculus. And, as far as the settings and the graphic settings and trying to pair that up with the Oculus and get the best experience, it's quite intimidating. But you can go on that forum, and there's people on there that have spent a lot of time sort of
working through
cataloging and working through how to get the best experience with, and the forum. That's how helpful they are. They just go on there and they'll write out in a thread the entire process of what you need to do to give yourself the best experience. So that's what I love about it. So even when you get into some of the weeds or some of the tougher parts, or if you really want to go hardcore, the community is very, very helpful in helping you sort of get through those sort of roadblocks and some of the tougher things when it comes to the hardware and the software to, if you really want to get that hard into it, it's real helpful.
So quick hitters, and maybe you can't. Maybe it's like all your children. You can't have a favorite car and a favorite track in iRacing.
Whatever is the next car.
The next.
So, and it's kind of, and it's probably horrible, but this is the case. That I've been doing this for 20 years, so I don't race as much as I used to, and what I do enjoy doing is whenever we're working on a new car, it's all loaded up and I like to drive it. And actually, one of the first track, I told Annette this, or she's around here somewhere. The first track I always take the car to is this track, New Hampshire Motor Speedway, and I do the South Oval, especially if it's a road car, because I've done 1,000 laps around this place in the real world, and so it has a special place for me.
Right.
This track in the road course here in particular, because it's where I saw my first race at Briar Motorsports Park, and you know, I came up here and raced with my dad, and you know, I've taken my girls, Madison and Macy, you know, to the track, and so this place just holds a special place in my heart for me, and so this will always be one of my favorite tracks, and it's always the first place that I'll take the next car we're working on to
bring it
drive
here.
it. Yeah.
How about you?
For me, probably was the original late model stock car. They have a super late model as well now, but I don't have a ton of time with that. But the original late model stock car at short tracks like South Boston, Lanier, Motor Mile, that's a lot of, you know, that just takes me kind of back to my roots, where I started racing, and so I really enjoy. I'm
a sucker for the street stock. I love it. I think it's the same reason I grew up here in New England. So I'll go to Thompson or Lee, and I'll take that street stock. And I know you think I'm kidding, but as a kid, I remember watching those cars work around like Lee Speedway. You get down to the 3 and there's that big patch and those bumps, and and it's like, I want to drive it. Like, I never had a chance to drive it. So
that's his street stock.
Oh, well, it drives like crap.
I think the street stock's mine. The late model stock car is ours. The original Xfinity car was ours. The original Cup COT was ours.
Yeah.
I don't know of anyone.
The street stock, actually, one of the guys that works for us worked for Dale.
He actually drove it.
He drove
Kevin
it.
Iannarelli.
And he wrecked it, right?
He wrecked it.
And then it ended up in the graveyard for a while, and then you pulled it out and restored it.
Pulled it out and restored it, and then y'all scanned it.
Well, TJ Majors, isn't he the inaugural winner in the street stock?
TJ drove in that street stock and won.
That's a great trivia question. The first ever driver to win for what is now Junior Motorsports, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, TJ Majors.
Is it really? Oh God, his head just went.
Oh yeah, listen to me. Here's this. He's gonna be good. Listen, I think we could go all night. It's great if you have never played, go on. It's simple. Download iRacing. Go check it out. You start fixed setup, basically Legend cars is still the start for the fixed setup, which who knew those things are tough to drive. The straightaways are. I had a laugh. So I said, man, these things are tough to drive, you know, straight. So then my son went out to the Tuesday night races at Charlotte, and he's like, they're just like in the screen. They loose his crap off, and he goes, and even down the straight, you better pay attention to that because it dumps on the left front.
Yeah.
He goes, so you got to kind of like baby it down into the corner. So
they're extremely realistic.
That's why we actually did his street stock, because people were having so much difficulty driving the Legends car.
Yeah.
It's not as easy.
The street stock's easier to drive. It's bigger, heavier.
So we switched them. We put the street stock in front of the Legends car. So now you still have to go through the Legends car at the rookie level, but at least you're starting with a car that's a little bit easier to drive when you first start.
Well, that's great. So this is Steve Myers, Executive Vice President, Executive Producer. I can't believe we didn't get into the producer conversation. I'll have to leave that for a whole nother one. Who knew you were of that sort of level? Dale Jr., co-host. We may never know. We might call you back. He was my iRacing expert, so he had it on with myself, Steve Letarte. Another episode of Letarte on Location from New Hampshire Motor Speedway. As always, it's available anywhere you get your podcast. Rate, review, and subscribe, and let us know what you thought.